Hello and welcome again to Bible Talk with Bruce and Becky. If you've been following us regularly, you know that we're still a little behind on our schedule. I did have a third visit to the hospital, but we are pretty confident that they have gotten my heart calmed down and the issue is taken care of. Let's get into Genesis. We'll continue to try to get to the story of Joseph and then finish that off. And you may want to be looking ahead when we finish Genesis. I think we're going to go to Revelation. It'll be okay. All questions will be answered in Revelation, many of them with three little words.
I don't know.
Those are the three.
And don't send money.
And I love you.
Ooh.
But hang in there until we get to that, and then we will have covered the first and last books of the Bible. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 30 tonight, a rather lengthy chapter that has to do, among other things, with the competition among Jacob's wives to see who can have the most children, and for Rachel finally being able to conceive. Becky, would you please read chapter 30, the first 8 verses?
Okie dokie. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I shall die." Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Then she said, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go in to her, so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went in to her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she...
That's for now.
All right.
All right, we begin the contest. Rachel is jealous because her sister Leah has been able to have children and she has not. Back in verse 31 of chapter 29, it says that the Lord saw that Leah was hated and he opened her womb. I don't think that means that Jacob actually hated Leah, but that he loved her less than Rachel, his favorite wife.
And she knew it.
Yes, she did. And as we go through the story, favoritism in the family causes a lot of trouble. Well, this practice, which apparently was common in those days, if a woman could not have children, her servant could sleep with her husband, and the children that were born would be considered the wife of the husband, in this case, Rachel.
And it just occurred to me that she actually named the kids, even though the kids were born by somebody else.
Yes, she did, thereby pressing her claim for them. I'll begin reading in verse 9. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah said, "Good fortune has come," so she called his name Gad, which sounds like the Hebrew word for good fortune.
Ye gads.
Naphtali sounds like the Hebrew for wrestling. Rachel talked about wrestling with the Lord. And Dan is the Hebrew word for judge. She said the Lord had judged me and given me a child. And Leah said, good fortune has come, so she called his name Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for women have called me happy. So she called his name Asher, which sounds like the Hebrew word for happy. Now we look at the first of two very questionable agricultural practices, and some popular folklore creeps into our story. Verse 14, in the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you've taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? Rachel said, then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. So they're not only competing for who can have children, but who gets to sleep with Jacob. When Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages because I gave my servant to my husband. So she called his name Issachar, which sounds like the Hebrew word for wages. Now, Becky will explain to us why Rachel would want to purchase some of Reuben's mandrakes.
I assume they're supposed to guarantee fertility.
That's a pretty good, smart guess. They believe mandrakes would increase fertility or ensure fertility.
We'll look up mandrakes.
Now, let me point out, because I have discovered over the years when studying with people, just because something is mentioned in the Bible doesn't mean that the Bible endorses it as true. No comment is made by the writer here about the mandrakes. This is popular folklore, but it figured into the rivalry between Rachel and Leah. I have no idea if mandrakes can increase fertility, but that's not the point that the Bible is making. The point here is a rivalry between the two women, not only for their husband's affection, but for who can have children. Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son, and Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun, which sounds like the Hebrew word for honor. Afterwards, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. This is one of the rare times that a daughter is mentioned and her name is given in this case. But that's all that's said about her at this point. Becky's been searching her phone for information on mandrakes. Have you found anything?
This is the mythology behind the plant. As a plant with the shape of a human body, and that's the roots are the shape.
Right.
Mandrake was believed to exercise control over the body. It could induce love or conception or bring good fortune, wealth, and power. And there are certain plants, I don't know which ones, that are still used by the Chinese because the roots look like human body.
Yes, some Asian cultures use that. And also it's widely believed that rhinoceros horns can be not only increase fertility, but be an aphrodisiac.
I'm not looking that up. No pictures.
Ask your parents at home. But rhinos are being poached for that, and their horns ground into powder. Well, now finally God answers Rachel's prayers. Becky, will you begin at verse 22 and read down to 36?
Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, Send me away, that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you. But Laban said to him, If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, I will give it. Jacob said to him, You yourself know how I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? He said, What shall I give you? Jacob said, You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later, when you have come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Laban said, Good, let it be as you have said. But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock.
Jacob and his father-in-law Laban, or Laban, are a good match for each other. Both of them are con men whose word cannot be trusted. So they make a bargain here that Jacob will get all the spotted and speckled as well as the black goats. But Laban tries to thwart that plan by removing all of them 3 days distance. But Jacob takes advantage of another popular belief of the time, that is, of prenatal influence, as to when a pregnant animal sees something, it influences how their offspring will look. By the way, before I forget, another practice that is mentioned here but not endorsed later on in the law will be forbidden. What does Laban do to try to get information on Jacob? He practices divination.
Yeah.
Divination, which is what, Becky?
Like a necromancy. You throw stones or you count bones or whatever.
Yeah, it's a form of magic to try to determine information and to determine the future. In the law, it's said that God's people should not do that because they don't need to go to fortune tellers or other kinds of magic. They just need to trust the Lord. All right, back to verse 37, where Jacob practices what he learned at Hebron A&M about how to get speckled and spotted lambs and goats. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. Since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
Despite the fact that you said these things are not necessarily endorsed by the Bible, the way that certain people reason from the Bible, there's every reason to think that because the Bible said here were the sticks and thusly they bred spotted lambs and goats, whatever.
Well, you have to read and look at the big picture.
And they had no scientific information beyond that up until what, 1930 something?
Oh no, earlier than that, but
When they knew about genetics.
Yeah.
Well, I guess with the peas they knew about genetics. I don't know.
yeah, Mendel did his work in the late Middle Ages.
Okay.
But Jacob and Laban probably would have believed that it was the sticks that did it, although Jacob should have known better. But we know from reading the whole story who is really blessing Jacob.
Yeah.
God is doing it in spite of the
machinations.
Yeah. They're trying to figure out on their own how to make things happen. Jacob is. And sure enough, they work out. But I would not encourage anybody who's raising sheep and goats to try this method of getting them to come out the color or the pattern that they want. God blesses him. He increases his flocks while Laban's do not increase as much. And Laban will recognize that, I believe, in the next chapter. Before we move on, I wanted to back up a little bit and pick up something that I overlooked earlier about the dream that Jacob had.
With the ladder?
Yes, with the ladder. Back in chapter 28, Jacob is making his way to Haran to get his wife. He lies down in a certain place where he stopped, and he has a dream. A dream of God's angels ascending and descending on a staircase or a ladder between earth and heaven. Yahweh appears to Jacob there and gives him a promise of a great number of offspring and a blessing to the world. In the Gospel of John, I believe about chapter 4, Jesus is speaking to Nathanael, who he's called to be a disciple. Nathanael is amazed that Jesus saw him under a certain tree earlier. We don't know what it was that amazed him. But Jesus said, "You'll see greater things than this. I tell you, you'll see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on," that's
Jesus.
your cue. It doesn't say Jesus. What does he say?
Son of Man?
On the Son of Man, which is the way he liked to refer to himself rather than Messiah. So Jesus says, paraphrasing, "I am even greater than Jacob, who saw the angels of God going up and down on the staircase to heaven. I will be that staircase between heaven and earth, and the angels of God will go up and down on me. Well, sure enough, in ways that they could not have understood at that point, but Jesus did. He is the connection between heaven and earth.
John 1:51.
151?
That's what it says.
I guess that's right, but I sure thought it was a later chapter. I
Okay.
may have made a mistake.
Well, it says and in. Let's see how far we go here. In Genesis 28. So there you go.
Okay, Becky corrects me with her ever-present Google. Well, as in many things in the Old Testament and even in Genesis, we're looking forward towards the coming of Messiah as the end result of all of these promises that God is making. And we can't really understand the Old Testament fully without reading the New Testament, nor can we understand the New Testament fully without a knowledge of the Old Testament, which it assumes in every point. Jesus doesn't point out in the Gospel of John. Well, see, I'm referring back to that ladder that Jacob saw in his dream. They would have known his reference because they knew their scriptures. Well, we're nearly through with Jacob. Next time, we'll see how Jacob tries to flee from his father-in-law and the outcome of that as we move ever more steadily toward the story of Joseph. My favorite, and I can't hardly wait to get there. But I think we'll quit for today. It's been good to talk to you again, and we'll see you soon, I hope in less than a week.
We've got about a minute. I can talk here, can I?
Go ahead and speak.
Okay. Last time we were on here, I asked for prayers, and I will say that it has hit my heart as I have tried to deal with my husband's illnesses that there are millions and millions of little old ladies out there trying to care for their ailing husbands. And I would advise you to go find one and see what you can do for them.
Okay, there's Becky's helpful hint for this time about how to help others. And we will say once more in closing, don't send money. Bye-bye.